Still, sharpness IV wasn't good enough, not for the long haul. He pulled out his elven steel armor, setting each piece carefully on the table. Protection IV, absolutely yes please. Unbreaking III, let's try rerolling that. His levels began dropping rapidly, like scattered chicken feed. When he reached level 29, Eric had obtained a complete set of protection IV armor. He even managed to enchant a book with unbreaking III. Just a little more experience, and he could enhance his sword further. So he did what made sense. He eliminated a bunch of chickens. A few minutes later, the sword was back on the enchanting table. Sharpness IV, respiration. Another fortunate roll for him. He combined the two swords using an anvil, and at last. Sharpness V. Unbreaking III. Sweeping edge III. Attack damage, 12. A blade more powerful than any netherite sword, pure devastating strength. With a full set of enchanted elven armor and a weapon that could slice through anything, Eric figured he could face that wolf-riding warband from the ogre forest directly. No sneaking around, no clever tactics, just steel, power, and determination. Small threats, no longer a concern for him. Still, Eric gazed at his sword, feeling somewhat unsatisfied. Only 3 enchantments on it. It didn't matter much, he was completely out of experience points. How could he obtain more enchanted books, though? Fishing was the answer. It wasn't particularly exciting, but it worked well enough. Bonus, you gained experience too. Except he needed string for the fishing rod. Eric paused, blinking in realization. After all this time spent here, he had never once collected a single piece of string. He really didn't want to hunt giant spiders in some dark forest or wasteland. Wait a moment. A memory surfaced. He passed a small farming village near Brimshire that cultivated flax. Flax, of course, flax equals string. Without any hesitation, Eric rushed off immediately. The next day, he returned carrying a few seeds and planted them right away, dousing them with bone meal. Crop gained, flax. Crafting recipe unlocked, 1 flax equals 1 string. No more spider hunting for me. He promptly started a flax field, harvested a bunch, and created a fishing rod. And then he cast his line into the water. The sun sank below the distant hills. One catch, then another one. Bow leather, rotten flesh, a bowl, a tripwire hook, a stick, a water bottle, an enchanted book. Junk, all of it is junk. He looked at the growing chest filled with fish and random items, letting out a yawn. Still, all-day fishing had brought him back up to level 30 again. Time for a better fishing rod. He enchanted it carefully. Luck of the Sea III. Unbreaking III. No lure enchantment, sadly. Could be worse, I suppose. That enchantment tripled his chances of reeling in treasure, definitely worth it. Night had fully fallen over the land. Eric wandered over to the pasture and tossed some feed to his livestock. Clink! Some wool dropped into his backpack unexpectedly. He stared at it curiously. His first wool ever. Wait a second. He'd never crafted a bed before this moment. Come to think of it, he hadn't really needed one anyway. He never got tired or sleepy. Mining, forging, building, repeat. Even his current bed was just 2 planks pushed together. No blankets, no pillow, not even a proper mattress. Not exactly inviting or comfortable. Eric frowned slightly. He didn't care much about comfort, but if guests ever visited, forcing them to sleep on wood slabs was, well, quite rude. Not everyone was a wanderer who could sleep on moss. So he crafted his first real bed. Then he made several more beds. His master bedroom now had 3 beds fused together into one massive slab of coziness. With a dramatic leap, Eric flopped onto the giant bed enthusiastically. Finally, he groaned, melting into the wool-stuffed softness. This is absolutely heavenly. The comfort was unreal, better than anything he'd ever slept on before, maybe even rivaling the beds of Rivendell. Respawn point set. Wait, what? Chapter 37, The Nether. Eric's heart pounded hard in his chest as he stared at the glowing letters etched into the game-like interface. Respawn only available within claimed territory. He'd suspected as much. ever since he first realized the hearts in his health bar were bright red. The normal kind, not the grayed-out hardcore mode ones. Still, it had remained just a theory. After all, it wasn't something he could exactly test. It's not like he could jump off a cliff just to find out. Now though, his nerves started to settle down. Bed functionality only works within claimed territory. Right, his domain, his rules, only within the boundaries of his personal stronghold could he be brought back to life. No wonder he'd never gotten a respawn prompt after sleeping in beds outside his claimed area. The system had just been waiting to spring the bad news on him like some prank. Honestly, it almost felt like an insult if he didn't expand his territory to cover the entire world. Maybe it was time to admit it. His current land was starting to feel a bit small. Still, doesn't matter, respawn or not, the plan is not to die either way. Eric gave his head a shake and filed the information away carefully. The truth was, the mechanics of this world were still a bit murky and unclear. There was no telling what might happen after death occurred. And honestly, the whole concept of dying left a sour taste in his mouth permanently. It wasn't just about fear, it was something deeper, existential discomfort lingering within. If he did die and came back, would he still be himself? Better not to test that theory. Still, he wasn't stupid or careless. He placed a few chests beside the bed and stocked them with spare gear. Weapons and supplies just in case something went wrong. That night, for the first time in a long while, Eric slept soundly and peacefully. By sunrise, he woke up refreshed and energized, no strange dreams, no unsettling glitches or errors. If anything, he felt content with everything. It really had just been a nap. Another day, another dose of hope ahead. Time to fish, he muttered, stretching his arms. No better way to start a morning. And so he did, fished from sunup till sundown continuously. Plopped. Finally, something decent caught his hook. An enchanted book appeared. Mending, he read aloud, eyebrows lifting upward. That'll do nicely for sure. He immediately applied it to the elven longsword, the ancient one forged in the First Age. Crafted by smiths whose names were probably written in runes no one could pronounce anymore. Not that the sword really needed mending at all. Its durability was already absurd beyond measure. And he'd barely even seen the bar twitch or move. Eric wasn't even sure how one would go about breaking it permanently. Maybe hurling it into a volcano and running it over with a herd of trolls. Maybe Sauron in his prime could manage it, maybe. After a quick snack, though his hunger bar hadn't really dipped much, Eric sat by the water. He stared at the ripples, brow furrowed in thought. Something was bothering him deeply. What was he forgetting about? Let's see, he'd set up the smeltery, built the forge, enchanting station was in place. Ah, right. The nether portal was missing. Eric reeled in his line, packed up, and headed down into the underground workshop. It was time to do this. He began pouring lava into casts, slowly creating obsidian one bucket at a time. As he worked diligently, his palms began to sweat nervously. The nether wasn't just another biome, it was somewhere else entirely. If he really opened a gate, someone or something would definitely notice. Eric wasn't sure how that entity might respond to his intrusion. He didn't even understand what sort of being it truly was. But the ingredients were all there waiting. And if he didn't try now, it would haunt him forever. He returned to the surface, 10 blocks of obsidian in hand carefully. He picked a flat patch of grass beside the fence, constructed the frame, and stood back. Click! The final block locked into place securely. Eric pulled out his flint and steel nervously. FSSSHK. The moment the portal flared to life, the air froze around him completely. Water trickled nearby, wind rustled the leaves, horses neighed in the pasture loudly. A cow bellowed lazily in the distance peacefully. Stars blinked overhead in an unbothered sky above. But for Eric, it felt like the entire sky had collapsed onto his shoulders heavily. An overwhelming presence surged downward, centering on the newly formed portal and on him. It stretched from the nether portal to Eric himself, invisible but undeniable in its weight. It wasn't hostile at all, not even aggressive or threatening. If anything, it felt gentle in nature. but the sheer scale of it crushed him under immense pressure. The kind of pressure you felt when standing beneath a mountain or looking into a storm. You just knew, deep in your bones, that you were incredibly small. Then from beyond the portal came a low, ambient humming sound. Like background music from a game, the haunting tune of the Nether, seeping into this world. And then a sigh perhaps. In a blink, the presence vanished completely. Eric stood there, panting hard, as if something had just let go of him. Information bloomed in his mind like a sudden vision appearing. Nether creatures cannot pass into the overworld through this gate. Likewise, native overworld beings cannot enter. The portal can only be built within territory. That last part felt like standard system mechanics rather than the work of that presence. But it made sense logically. Unlimited Nether expansion would break the world in half completely. You let pigmen flood the overworld unchecked, and pretty soon it's not the song of creation anymore. It's the oinking of apocalypse instead. Still, the way was open now. Eric suited up, packed supplies carefully, and stepped through the gate. Whoosh! Achievement unlocked, into the madness. Weightlessness hit him first, then intense heat. Blazing crimson filled his vision as he landed on soft nether rock below. A gust of dry, scorching air rushed past him. "I'm here," he muttered quietly. The nether realm. He took his first step, boots crunching over the strangely spongy surface beneath. It felt oddly familiar somehow. Whew! A ghostly wail echoed from the distance ominously. A fireball hurtled toward him from the horizon rapidly. Eric didn't even flinch at all. Combat instincts honed through ambushes and skirmishes kicked in instantly. He turned smoothly, drew the elven sword, and sliced through air. The fireball pinged off the blade and sailed back toward its sender perfectly. Achievement unlocked, return to sender plus 50 XP. Ghast creature. Big, floaty, whiny, honestly, compared to all the sneaky archers and elite mobs he'd fought back in the overworld, these floating jellyfish were laughably slow. Their fireballs felt like tossing back oversized beach balls casually. Still, he wasn't taking chances with anything. He built a cobblestone shell around the portal protectively. If it got blown up, he'd be stuck in here, and that was a recipe for disaster. Thwip! An arrow zipped past his ear dangerously. He turned quickly. A skeletal archer had spawned on the soul sand ridge behind him recently. The thing loosed another shot immediately. Too slow for him. Eric raised his blade, deflecting the next shot with ease effortlessly. Seriously, that's your best shot available. 2 quick slashes later, the skeleton was reduced to bone dust. He glanced around carefully. The nether looked like Minecraft on nightmare difficulty settings. Still blocky, sure, but the mobs had a slightly more realistic polish to them now. Like someone had tried to upscale their horror settings deliberately. Didn't matter much, they still couldn't hit the broad side of a barn accurately. Eric was just about to head back when something caught his eye suddenly. A deep brown fortress, half sunken in a lava pool, looming on the edge of the ridge. A nether fortress structure. Now that was lucky for him. He pulled out his cobblestone and started bridging across the lava lake carefully. Soon, he stepped onto its burning hot bricks cautiously. Achievement unlocked, a terrible fortress. And so began the plunder operation. No chest was spared from his search. By the time he was done thoroughly, his inventory was bulging with loot collected. 9 diamonds, 23 gold ingots, assorted iron gear, flint, gold tools, iron horse armor pieces, and a rare diamond horse barding. Not bad at all, honestly. Of course, it wasn't just loot he was here for ultimately. He also needed nether wart, and most importantly blaze spawners. Chapter 38, Journey Through the Nether. Nether wart, essential for potion-making processes, blazes, walking furnaces, and the only reliable source of blaze rods available. Brewing stand, can't make potions without one obviously. So naturally, Eric found himself deep in the infernal chaos of the nether realm. Swinging a sword at burning monsters like it was just another Tuesday afternoon. Clang! His blade struck a blaze hard, but instead of the satisfying crunch of flesh, it rang like steel on steel. No one really knew what these things were made of exactly, but clearly, it wasn't anything soft. Boom, booms, boom. Several blazes hurled fireballs at him from all directions simultaneously. The barrage would have been fatal for anyone else, surely, but Eric simply raised his shield with a grunt. The fireballs exploded harmlessly against it, not even denting the thing at all. Achievement unlocked, Dancing with Fire. One blaze rod acquired successfully. Creak. A few wither skeletons crept up from behind, hoping for a cheap shot on him. They never got close enough. With sharp spatial awareness and flawless footwork, Eric dispatched them in 3 swift strikes. The Sweeping Edge enchantment was living up to its name perfectly. One slash crippled the target, and the concussive wave shattered the bones of the others nearby. Honestly, it was far more intense than in the game version. After camping near the blaze spawner for a bit and gathering the materials he needed, Eric realized there wasn't much else to scavenge from this nether fortress. So he called it a day finally. On the way out, he scooped up some soul sand and glowstone for good measure. He even sliced through a magma cube and collected a handful of magma cream pieces. Excellent for brewing fire resistance potions. Handy stuff, really, nothing like turning lava into a minor inconvenience. Stepping through the portal, he exhaled deeply. Phew. Back in the overworld now. The air didn't smell like rotten eggs and burning socks, much better indeed. Beneath his farm, Eric hollowed out a new chamber to plant his hard-earned nether wart crop. Achievement unlocked, Local Brewery. Time to put those blaze rods to use properly, first order of business, a brewing stand. Then, of course, a few potions to christen the setup appropriately. His enchanting table, brewing station, and nether portal were now neatly organized in a single hall. He'd even added some basic decoration touches. For the first time, it was starting to look like a real wizard's sanctum. You know, he muttered, admiring his work carefully, might as well build a proper wizard tower here. Grinning, he grabbed a freshly brewed swiftness potion, enhanced it with glowstone dust, and turned it into a splash potion using gunpowder. Then off to the stables he went. Smash! The bottle shattered, showering 2 of his best horses in shimmering mist magically. He followed it up by feeding them both golden carrots immediately. Moments later, the pair trotted back with a new foal, lightning fast and full of attitude. He repeated the process twice more carefully. Finally, speed 20 meters per second. He'd done it, a thoroughbred born for the wind itself. He built a private stall just for this prize steed, then returned to his brewing station to stock up. Strength, swiftness, night vision, water breathing, fire resistance, he brewed a full set of potions. Unfortunately, the gas tier had plunged into a lava lake before he could grab it. No regeneration potion today, sadly. Still, as Eric picked up a fire resistance potion, his thoughts drifted back to Moria clearly. You're not the only one who can play with fire, Balrog. But brute force was another matter entirely different. That thing was absolutely massive in size. Even without flame magic, it could demolish buildings just by charging through them recklessly. And Smog, Eric still wouldn't bet against the dragon in a head-on fight. Not enough, still not enough power. He looked down at his elven steel armor carefully. Even with enchantments, he was painfully aware of how far he had to go still. Stronger, I need to be stronger than this. He opened his inventory screen, 12 diamonds total, then looked toward the nether portal entrance. The nether still held many secrets hidden, like bastions for example. Dangerous places crawling with piglins, but also potentially holding netherite, rare diamond gear, and treasure beyond measure. He packed his fire resistance potions, enchanted golden apples, lembas bread, and other supplies carefully. Then stepped back into the nether realm. This direction looks promising enough. Finding a bastion was no easy task, especially when everything felt so real around him. Eric picked a path and committed fully fighting skeletons, laying cobblestone roads, crossing through warped forests safely. Cooking hoglins over open flame, and swimming through lava lakes with potions in hand. Days passed by, he had no idea whether it was day or night anymore until finally, he spotted it. A massive obsidian black structure loomed in the distance ahead. Piglin sentries roamed the ramparts, some with crossbows, others wielding golden swords and axes efficiently. A few even wore armor protection. Unlike the mindless zombie pigmen he'd encountered earlier, these piglins had something behind their eyes clearly: intelligence and cunning. Eric slipped on a pair of golden boots he'd crafted for this exact reason specifically. Achievement unlocked, Glory Days. A few piglins patrolling with crossbows paused to sniff the air and give him a long look. Then they went about their business normally. Eric let out a quiet breath, relieved. He still had nightmares about his first run-in with piglins, getting mobbed in seconds because he didn't know the rules. And those brutes, their golden axes could cleave through shields like butter easily. One wrong move and it was game over. Stealth was the name of the game here. He slowly approached the bastion, placing cobblestone one block at a time carefully. Gold armor might fool the standard piglins, but brutes didn't care at all. They had 50 health and 0 patience whatsoever. Honestly, the only thing tougher was a troll in a bad mood perhaps. But Eric had one thing they didn't possess: brains and strategy. He waited until a brute entered a dead-end corridor, then quietly built a wall behind it. Thud, thud. The brute turned, confused, and found itself completely sealed in tight. Muffled grunts followed afterward. Eric moved on quickly. It became a routine process. One by one, he walled them in securely. Brutes, regular piglins, even the unsuspecting civilians weren't spared. None were safe from the sneaky architect, with a never-ending supply of cobblestone blocks. Some of the smarter piglins exchanged worried glances nervously. Whispers about a legendary ancient builder began to spread around. Too bad it was already too late. Eric looted the bastion clean completely. 1 diamond chestplate, 1 diamond pickaxe, a bar of netherite material, a smithing template item. Plus dozens of hidden gold blocks, enchanted crossbows, golden carrots, crying obsidian, and other odds and ends. His inventory overflowed completely. He had to leave half the junk behind, unfortunately. But all in all, a good haul overall. With the crying obsidian, he crafted something special and useful: a respawn anchor device. Only usable in the nether, but it let him revive up to 4 times before needing a recharge. He placed it near the portal and powered it up with glowstone blocks. Now, even if he died, he'd come back alive. He didn't return home just yet though. Instead, he pressed on, following the bastion trail deeper into the nether realm. 1 netherite bar was far from sufficient. Eric spent nearly a month wandering through that hellish terrain. Eventually, he discovered another bastion. He used the same strategy, trapping enemies and raiding the chests. Hidden among gold nuggets and bones, he found the last piece: a 4th fragment of ancient debris. At last, Eric whispered. He approached his portable crafting station. He merged 4 gold ingots with 4 netherite scraps. With a satisfying clink, the 4th netherite ingot materialized in his palm. Chapter 39: The Unexpected Visitor. Only the heavens understood how many piglin bastions Eric had looted. He could have excavated ancient debris himself, but the chances were ridiculously slim. Even with luck, he wouldn't have sufficient diamonds for proper armor. Bastions resolved both issues simultaneously. Each treasure chest always contained at least 1 diamond item. Sometimes armor, sometimes weapons or tools, all remarkably valuable. To create space, Eric discarded nearly everything else. Food, potions, even an entire stack of iron blocks landed on the floor. Iron was plentiful. He had a whole vein beneath his base. He could afford such wastefulness. But everything had been worthwhile. His nether expedition had finally concluded. Eric began retracing his path toward the portal. The journey there had been nightmarish. Constructing bridges over lava lakes, climbing jagged terrain, avoiding spawning mobs. It was a logistical catastrophe. But returning, that proved simple. He just sprinted along the paved road he'd already constructed. Several days later, Eric reached the obsidian archway. Along the way, he'd sliced through ghasts and knocked down endermen. He examined the cool, glassy ender pearls in his hand. These would fetch a fine price in town, he said. Though, if someone accidentally threw one, they'd probably panic. It was time to return home. A flash of white light engulfed him completely. Sunlight pierced his eyes like a dagger. After weeks in the Nether's crimson darkness, blue skies seemed surreal. Autumn has arrived, he observed, feeling a cool breeze. Over half a year had passed since Eric arrived here. He always seemed to be adventuring or preparing for one. He inhaled deeply, clearing the lingering sulfur from his lungs. Then stretched his arms upward, savoring the peaceful silence. First priority, he emptied his backpack in the storage chamber. Then headed straight for the enchantment table. Thanks to his nether grinding, he now possessed complete diamond armor. Some pieces already had decent enchantments. His experience level had reached 42, sufficient for proper enchanting. Eric converted everything into books, rerolling repeatedly for desired traits. When XP depleted, he went fishing, then enchanted again. This continued for another full week. His chests were now overflowing with enchanted items. Bows, rods, books, some worthless, some excellent. One enchanted rod, with luck of the sea III, helped considerably. He assembled a nearly flawless bow at the anvil. Power V, Infinity, Unbreaking III, Punch II, and Flame. It wasn't as powerful as the orcish bow he discovered earlier. But the enchantments more than compensated. At least until he gained enough experience for the orcish one. He also maximized his fishing rod with lure III and mending. All of this was pleasant, but merely preparation. The real treasure was the complete diamond armor set. Now it was time for the upgrade. Eric approached the smithing table. He retrieved his gleaming diamond armor and 4 hard-earned netherite ingots. Achievement unlocked, covered in debris. He donned the armor, now transformed into sleek, obsidian black material. It shimmered with an eerie luminescence. Thick and imposing, yet moved like a second skin. The perfect combination of strength and agility. Standing there in newly forged armor, Eric felt genuinely unstoppable. Nothing in this realm could push him backward. Each piece provided a full point of knockback resistance. With protection IV on every slot, he was essentially a mobile fortress. Now he felt prepared to confront the genuine dangers ahead. But first, one final enhancement. He retrieved the ancient elven longsword he discovered long ago. He granted it the enchantments it truly merited. Sharpness V, Unbreaking III, Sweeping Edge III, Looting III, Mending, Fire Aspect II. He considered adding knockback, but decided against it. Launching enemies across the area only complicated finishing them. Better to maintain them close. With everything finally complete, Eric continued working. Mining, farming, feeding livestock, brewing potions, smelting ores, building, expanding. The castle was developing, along with his stockpile. But something still troubled him. No redstone, not here, not in the Nether. Without redstone, automation remained impossible. No hoppers, no contraptions, he couldn't test any mechanisms properly. Time passed, days merged together. He worked continuously, handling everything himself. The castle began to flourish. Then, one pleasant morning, something unusual occurred. Eric was leaning casually against the outer wall, enjoying the scenery. He noticed a figure standing outside the gate. Someone had arrived. An elderly man in a gray cloak and pointed hat appeared. He leaned on a wooden staff, puffing a long-stemmed pipe. He stared at the enormous structure with a furrowed brow. His expression suggested his entire understanding had been shaken. "Either I've lost my memory, or the world's gone insane," the man muttered. Curious, Eric pulled a lever nearby. Clang, he returned it to Gandalf, who grasped it with both hands. The instant he did, the staff glowed faintly. He swung it experimentally. Whoosh, whoosh. The air seemed to split before it. "I can sense it," Gandalf whispered. "It's more solid now and keener. You've transformed it into a true weapon." He offered a rare smile. "Thank you, young Eric. This will simplify my journey considerably." The wizard hesitated, clearly uncertain whether to address him as Lord, Builder, Enchanter, or Wandering Anomaly. In the end, he simply used his name. "I'm pleased it's useful," Eric answered, satisfied. His territory might be vast, but honestly, much remained incomplete. Many plots stayed unassigned, and several zones were bare land. So showing a visitor around didn't require much time. Yet at every stop, Gandalf shared a tale. At the alchemy laboratory, he spoke. "Ah, potions. There's someone in the eastern forest who experiments with these too. His mixtures mostly heal injured creatures, though sometimes they turn hair purple." At the nether wart nursery, Gandalf lifted an eyebrow. The eerie crimson stalks grew from soul sand patches. "Is this?" he asked. "Nether wart," Eric confirmed. Gandalf knelt beside the soil, frowning deeply. "Where I'm from, this sand exists only in cursed eastern swamps. Places haunted by the deceased, where phantoms pull victims into muck." "Relax," Eric thought. "Here it simply makes you float like a balloon." "Forgive me," Gandalf said aloud. "But this appears mildly ominous. You're growing potion components in a medium made of, well, souls." He glanced at the wart again skeptically. "It reminds me of necromancy," he thought. Still, he didn't protest. Gandalf merely raised his brows, shook his head, and continued. That was his manner, curious, cautious, but seldom confrontational. But when they reached the nether portal, all composure vanished. Gandalf stopped completely in his tracks. Eyes wide, mouth slightly parted. The obsidian frame shimmered with otherworldly power, humming like a profound heartbeat. Flames licked the edges of the violet vortex. "This," he breathed. A thin smoke ribbon curled upward as his pipe fire flared. Chapter 41, Disturbance in the Misty Mountains. If everything Gandalf witnessed before could be explained with some memory fragment or resemblance to familiar magic, then this door defied all logic. It didn't belong to this realm. Not magic, not ancient spirits, not even the finest dwarven craftsmanship. All of those, at least, had origins here. But this was different entirely. "This isn't supposed to exist here," Gandalf muttered. He stared at the massive infernal gate before them. His eyes narrowed beneath his wide hat brim. And yet here it stands. Which means someone or something approved its presence. A new verse in the world's song, perhaps. He paused, then sighed heavily. "Pity I won't hear it play." "Nothing worthwhile to hear inside anyway," Eric said, stepping forward. "Just lava, some abandoned ruins, and whatever remains of former inhabitants." Though he made it sound ordinary, the truth was more dramatic. If ancient records were accurate, the entire hellish expanse might be a long-deceased colossal beast's remains. And the ruins inside were likely remnants of an actual prehistoric civilization. Gandalf stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Sounds like the deep pit of Moria again." He glanced around and chuckled lightly. "To be honest, I'm still recovering from shock. This entire territory, its scale, the design, the resources, it's enormous. I expected a bustling stronghold filled with settlers. Not wandering automatons." As if summoned, a nearby iron golem trudged up. It tilted its head curiously at Gandalf. Then it reached into a side compartment. It carefully presented a single, slightly crumpled red flower. "Oh, why thank you," Gandalf said, genuinely moved. He gently tucked the flower into his satchel. Clank, clank. The golem turned and resumed its slow patrol with mechanical grace. Eric gave a lopsided smile. "Not much assistance around here, so I handle most things myself." He didn't elaborate further. But if people ever needed shelter, he wouldn't refuse them. Maybe it was time to consider that more seriously. Unlike the whirlwind visitor Farad'n, Gandalf was content to stay several days when Eric offered. In fact, he claimed a guest room immediately, though with proper manners. He was polite, helpful, and answered Eric's questions with surprising detail. Spending time with Gandalf felt natural and easy. The old wizard wasn't just knowledgeable. He carried the same wisdom weight as Elrond. But where Elrond was serene and formal, Gandalf possessed a much looser, wandering spirit. The days passed swiftly. One morning, Gandalf found Eric near the basalt garden edge. He was feeding a parrot with bread crumbs. "Eric," Gandalf said, staff in hand. "Thank you for your hospitality. It's been memorable, but I must depart now." Eric wiped his hands clean. "May your path be smooth and full of fresh pipe weed." Gandalf chuckled warmly. It truly has been a pleasure. Especially your cooking. I dare say I'm somewhat reluctant to leave. I've got a hobbit friend who said something very similar. Ha, with your cooking, it's a wonder you haven't been adopted by an entire Shire village. Gandalf slung a pack of travel supplies over his shoulder. It was Eric's parting gift. He turned toward the trail ahead. I'm off to pursue a bit of adventure. Eric's brow arched curiously. Adventure? Yes, Gandalf said, eyes twinkling brightly. Something's brewing out there, and I intend to discover what. Eric's fingers itched with interest. Truth be told, aside from a recent encounter with Hellspawn, he hadn't ventured out properly in weeks. Gandalf paused deliberately. I could use a companion, of course. Always more exciting with company. Moments later, Eric emerged from his armory. He was dressed head to toe in netherite black armor, sharp and gleaming. A diamond-armored horse stamped impatiently beside him. So, he asked casually, where are we going? Gandalf stared, mouth slightly open. Eric, my boy, he managed to say. We are embarking on an adventure. Subtle reconnaissance, not marching to war. What? This is my adventure equipment. Gandalf pointed at the armored steed. I strongly suggest returning the warhorse to the stable. And maybe, dressing like someone who isn't preparing to besiege a fortress. Eric blinked, then glanced at Gandalf's weather-worn robes and unassuming staff. Indeed, the wizard's cloak seemed perfect for travel, durable, comfortable, and utterly inconspicuous. Reluctantly, Eric stashed his helmet and slipped a loose linen cloak over his armor. It was oversized and hooded, draping him like a wandering wizard. The netherite beneath remained there, but hidden now. Truthfully, the armor wasn't bulky whatsoever. It was sleek, well-fitted, and didn't restrict his movements. If anything, it gave him more confidence. But for Gandalf's sake, he went with the disguise. Now he looked more like a rugged ranger. Albeit one whose leather armor had been replaced with very stylish high-tier combat plating. Well, Gandalf sighed, eyeing the metallic glint still visible at Eric's wrists. It's an improvement. If the weight doesn't bother you. Not an issue, Eric stated flatly. The concept of heavy seemed irrelevant to him. Then let us depart, Gandalf gestured eastward. Eric followed the line of the staff. The Misty Mountains. Precisely, Gandalf confirmed, his expression turning serious. The orcs there grow unnervingly bold, skulking near the very borders of Rivendell. They plot something, I am certain. Their purpose must be uncovered. Eric shifted slightly, metal scraping softly under the cloak. About that, I might have some insight. They were rather fixated on me recently. Sent several hundred warg riders this way over the past months. Didn't end well for most of them. Things have been quiet since. Gandalf stared at him intently. Hundreds. I didn't keep exact count. Lost track after 80. And you survived that. Did better than survive. Eric pulled up his status menu with a flick. Turns out I'm their sworn nemesis now. Reputation, Misty Mountain orcs, negative 370, mortal enemy. Good grief, what did you do to them? Eric shrugged casually. Just what I said. Took out a few hundred of their elite cavalry. Gandalf let out a long sigh. Well, that solves one mystery. He turned serious again. But there's more. The orcs haven't just been prowling the western passes. They've also reclaimed ancient strongholds on the eastern slopes. Ruins abandoned since the old wars with the dwarves. No idea what they're planning, he added, worry creasing his brow. Eric nodded slowly. Sounds like it's worth investigating. Truth be told, he'd never traveled farther than Rivendell before. Having someone like Gandalf as a guide on this trek through wild lands felt like the perfect opportunity. Chapter 42, Blocking the Pass. For both Eric and Gandalf, travel and peril were as routine as breathing. Especially for Eric, who'd only recently escaped the flaming pits of the Nether. Compared to that infernal landscape, hiking through Middle-earth almost felt like a countryside picnic. At least here, he didn't have to inhale the stench of brimstone or handle oppressive heat. Not that the heat bothered him physically, but it was uncomfortable. And Eric, despite everything, valued his comfort greatly. "Which route are we taking?" Eric asked, gesturing toward the jagged peaks ahead. To cross the misty mountains, there were two paths available. One cut directly through the mountains via the high pass. The other detoured northward past Isengard, safe, but incredibly out of the way. "High pass," Gandalf replied without hesitation. Eric raised a brow questioningly. "That place, huh? Are we expecting company? I seem to recall many orcs skulking around there." It wasn't an idle concern at all. The orc stronghold was practically next door. In fact, the very warlord who'd put a bounty on Eric's head resided in that direction. "There are two routes through the pass," Gandalf explained. "We'll take the higher one and avoid them if possible." "Fine by me," Eric shrugged. Truthfully, he wasn't worried whatsoever. Even if he stumbled into the warlord's dining hall by accident, he could still cut his way out. The Nether hadn't left him empty-handed at all. The gold from the Piglin bastions had padded his inventory nicely. He had enchanted apples, a fire-forged blade, and armor made from netherite alloy. Unless a Balrog decided to show up, he was good. Still, the high pass. That place had other things lurking. A shadow flickered in Eric's memory, big eyes, pale skin, and a hiss that haunted tunnels. "Gollum," and the glint of a gold ring reflected briefly in his mind's eye. They weren't riding, but the pace was brisk and steady. They only paused to eat occasionally. Eric didn't need sleep at all. As long as he had food, he was tireless. Gandalf, on the other hand, looked like he should have needed a nap every 10 steps. But the old wizard was surprisingly spry and energetic. Once he realized Eric wasn't going to request rest stops, he stopped pretending to need them either. Through barren wildlands they marched, past the ancient stone bridge. Until finally, under the midday sun, the snowy ridges of the misty mountains came into view. Eric stopped and whistled appreciatively. Now that's a view. They had reached the roof of the continent, the misty mountains. "No time to admire it," Gandalf called back. "If we don't make it through the pass before nightfall, we'll encounter orcs on the move." "Understood." They pressed onward determinedly. All day they climbed, feet crunching on gravel and frost. Even during meals, they didn't stop moving. And despite their caution, trouble still found them eventually. "Arr, rogue." A low growl froze them mid-step. Both men scanned their surroundings carefully. Gandalf gripped his staff tightly. Eric drew his elven sword, which began to glow faintly. But no attack came immediately. They exchanged glances and crept toward the noise cautiously. Behind a large boulder, 2 wargs and 5 orcs stood in a tent circle, snarling at each other. "I saw it first," one orc snapped angrily. "You smelled it first doesn't mean you own it," another retorted sharply. "Arrarog." It seemed a quarrel had broken out over a carcass. "They're fighting over a kill," Gandalf whispered quietly. "Wargs want a bigger share because of their size. The orcs argue they found it first." "Huh," Eric mused thoughtfully. "Wargs and orcs fighting over dinner. That's not something you see every day." "Wargs aren't mindless beasts," Gandalf said quietly. "They're intelligent, cunning creatures. They ally with orcs, but they're not pets. Not trainable either, not unless you walk the path of shadow." Eric grinned slightly. "That'd explain why they always try to eat me." Then one of the wargs paused, sniffed the air, and turned its head. "We should go," Gandalf murmured, already stepping back cautiously. Eric tilted his head curiously. "Or, hear me out, we could stay and fight." "Rrargh." The warg made the decision for them, leaping toward their hiding spot. Eric didn't flinch at all. Sword flashing, he sprang from cover and brought his blade down in a single arc. Foom. The sword struck the beast with a burst of fire. Flames exploded across its fur, engulfing it mid-snarl. The warg didn't even hit the ground alive. Gandalf blinked, eyeing Eric's sword, then his armor. HMPH. He made no move to help whatsoever. Meanwhile, the orcs had seen enough already. The sight of a lone man in char-black armor, wielding a flame-forged sword, was enough. It made them rethink their day completely. They bolted away quickly. Even the second warg yelped and fled after them. Not bad, Eric said, sheathing his blade smoothly. Looks like I'll be taking it easy this trip, Gandalf muttered under his breath. He was definitely planning to slack off now. Come on, Eric said, already heading forward briskly. Before they fetch reinforcements. But reinforcements had already arrived unexpectedly. As they reached the final slope, close to exiting the pass, a sharp twang sliced the air. Thunk! An arrow slammed into Eric's chest and bounced harmlessly off his armor. His health bar didn't even flicker slightly. Eric and Gandalf turned to see a mob of orcs stampeding through the narrow passage behind them. They were screaming and tossing spears and axes like angry toddlers. Run, Gandalf shouted, ducking a whirling blade. Eric didn't budge at all. Instead, he grinned widely. Actually, I think I'll stay. Shing. He drew his sword again and pulled on his helmet. He turned away from Gandalf and walked straight back into the pass. Thud. The first orc, unlucky enough to reach him, was defeated cleanly. The force of the blow sent the nearby orcs reeling backwards. Some dropped weapons, others stumbled on impact. Swoosh! Eric swept his blade again, sending burning orcs tumbling backward. They crashed into their comrades, spreading fire and panic through their ranks. He stood at the mountain pass like a wall of iron. His blade was a whirlwind of fire and steel. Orcs charged and bounced off him like flies against obsidian. Some tried to flank him, swarming with clubs and spears. But their weapons glanced off his netherite armor with useless clinks. His health dipped for a moment, then instantly regenerated. Their crude blades broke first easily. And soon, the defeated piled up significantly. The intense smell was quickly overtaken by the scent of burning. The shrieking of the defeated orcs turned to silence, then whispers, and finally terror. He's the one, the wild mage. An orc at the back screamed in recognition clearly. He had seen this warrior before. Panic spread rapidly through their ranks. Even the wargs, bearing cracked fangs, shrank back fearfully. Their tails went between their legs. Eric stood alone in the narrowing mountain pass. His sword glowed like a torch brightly. His helmet glinted in the twilight eerily. Come on then, he bellowed, laughter in his voice. Come and get me, you walking compost piles. Gandalf, watching from a distance, couldn't help the eerie feeling in his gut. This reminded him of something troubling. Of someone from the past. Sauron, perhaps, when he strode from his tower in flesh. Wielding terror like a weapon, laying waste to the kings of men and elves. Eric wasn't that exactly. But in that moment, facing down a mountain's worth of orcs with nothing but a sword and a smile. He wasn't far off from it. Chapter 43, Schemes. Buzz. Far beneath the earth, hidden in the darkness, a single ring trembled faintly. My precious. A grimy hand stroked its surface with obsessive care. Clutching it tightly, as if to keep it from vanishing into thin air. Power, the stronger you are, the easier it is to fall under its spell. The truly mighty are often the most blind. But no matter how many try to possess it, there's only ever been one true master of that ring. Gandalf's voice echoed across the base of the mountain range as he walked ahead. His gray cloak brushed against the misty grass. He was recounting tales from long ago, pointing toward distant landmarks as he spoke. Take Isildur, for instance. He fell to temptation right at the edge of the volcano. He could have ended it all, thrown the ring into the fire. But he didn't do it. He was slain further south, in the marshes of Golden Iris. That's where the ring was lost, maybe to the depths of the sea. Eric followed silently behind him, listening with half a nod now and then. Wouldn't it have been easier if someone had just kicked him into the lava? Eric muttered. Gandalf gave him a sideways glance, half amused by the comment. Fate does not bend to simple logic, Eric. Even if you replayed that moment 100 times, 1,000, he'd still make the same choice. Fine, I'll take your word for it. They kept walking steadily, swapping bits of commentary here and there. They were oddly relaxed considering they'd just escaped a battlefield. Eric, of course, hadn't intended to fight a drawn-out war with the orcs. After helping Gandalf hold the cave entrance briefly, he'd opted for the more practical solution. smash through and run like hell. Surprisingly, the orcs hadn't chased them with much force afterward. Perhaps they were spooked badly. Or perhaps they were just unprepared entirely. Gandalf, though, was beginning to notice something peculiar developing. This Eric fellow, strange one indeed. On one hand, he knew ancient secrets even most loremasters had long forgotten. On the other hand, he had no clue about the most basic events. Ask him about the foundation of the dwarven strongholds, silence. Ask him about a half-buried ruin nobody's ever heard of. He'd tell you what color the roof tiles were. It was downright contradictory entirely. SHH. Gandalf suddenly stopped moving. They had crossed into the low plains, far from the misty mountains now. He raised a hand and signaled Eric to be silent. Orcs! A deep growl rolled over the plain, followed by a thunderous gallop. A pack of warg riders rushed past, kicking up dust, headed toward the east. There's either a camp or a fortress in that direction, Gandalf muttered. He peeked through the tall grass cautiously. What do we do, charge in and burn it down? Eric asked with a grin. Oh, certainly not, Gandalf said with a faint frown. There are only two of us. We'd be. Then he paused abruptly. Looking at Eric's perfectly calm, almost smug expression, Gandalf began to reconsider seriously. Actually, it might not be entirely impossible. Still best to scout at first, he added quickly. We don't know how many there are. Could be 20, could be 200. Agreed, said Eric. Though the gleam in his eyes suggested he was hoping for the bigger number. They crept along the same trail the orcs had taken, cloaked beneath their dusty robes. Before long, the two came upon a ramshackle camp built from the ruins of a half-collapsed fortress. Calling it a fortress was generous honestly. It looked more like someone had tried to slap together a camp using whatever scraps were left. Using the remaining stone walls for structure. A few wargs gnawed bones by the fire. While over 20 orcs lounged about the camp, arguing, snoring, or shoving each other. One of them, a particularly bulky orc with cracked tusks and a jagged axe, seemed to be the leader. He was barking orders and smacking others around. There, Gandalf said quietly, gesturing with his staff. 17 orcs, 12 wargs. And no discipline whatsoever. 2 orcs were already in the middle of a brawl. Shrieking and swearing at each other, while the rest watched like it was an arena match. Unity, Gandalf said with a smirk, is not a trait the orcs possess. They'll fight over anything, food, weapons, even insults. Why not give them a little nudge, he added. He scooped up a small stone carefully. He gave it a quick puff of breath and plink, tossed it straight at the head of a dozing orc. Who hit me? The startled orc shot up, glaring around with murder in his eyes. Shut up, grunted the orc next to him. You throw in rocks, you maggot. What if I was? Thunk. The dozing orc grabbed a handful of stones and hurled them into the other one's face, sending him stumbling backward clumsily. Filthy swine, the second orc roared, tackling him hard. The two rolled across the camp, punching, biting, cursing loudly. None of the others even flinched slightly. This was normal behavior. One went down eventually, groaning and bruised badly. The other spat on him and strutted off like a champion. Gandalf crouched beside Eric, chuckled wickedly under his breath. I do this a lot. Helps thin the numbers without raising the alarm. Clever, Eric nodded approvingly. Thank you. Just as Gandalf was lining up another stone for round 2, Eric stood up. What are you? Gandalf blinked in surprise. Eric reached over his shoulder and unsheathed a sword glowing with blue fire. Too slow. I say we just get it over with. Shing. Intruders. REHH. Orcs leapt into action, scrambling to mount their wargs or snatch up weapons. Gandalf sighed and stood up slowly. Reckless boy couldn't wait 5 more minutes. Well, what do we have here? The orc leader sneered menacingly. A sword-waving manling and a walking beard with a stick. Who gave you the GUTS to step into MY camp? Kill them. The warlord raised his cleaver high, and the horde surged forward violently. Boom! Eric charged straight in, sword flashing brightly. 3 warg riders came at him aggressively. One sweep, whoosh, and their mounts caught fire instantly. The flames crackling across dry fur, lighting up the night dramatically. The riders screamed and tumbled off. Behind him, Gandalf glanced at the flames carefully. In the blink of an eye, the fire, nearly smothered by rolling bodies, suddenly surged up again, roaring with new life intensely. The blaze was so intense, it ignited several nearby orcs instantly. Eric didn't look back at all. He knew Gandalf bore one of the rings of fire. A ring that could not only kindle flames, but also ignite hope. Eric was a storm in steel. Dressed in black armor, he plowed into the orc horde, shrugging off arrows and axes. Wargs fell defeated, orcs screamed, the air filled with the smell of burnt hair. Some of the orcs started backing away fearfully. He was formidable with a glowing sword. But of course, the smarter ones turned to the weaker target, the old man. Bad idea entirely. One orc charged Gandalf with a spiked club. The wizard barely shifted position. With a twist of the staff, he jabbed the orc in the gut and flipped him flat. Another orc lunged from the side aggressively. Cracked. Gandalf's staff spun with surprising grace, smashing into the orc's helmet and leaving a dent deep enough to hold water. He blinked in surprise. That was a bit more effective than I expected. More orcs circled him now, thinking they could overwhelm him. Gandalf raised his staff high dramatically. Boom! A blinding arc of lightning tore through the air above the camp, followed by the sharp tang of ozone. Half a dozen orcs dropped like puppets with their strings cut. Chapter 44, Splitting Up. Eric holed up. On the eastern edge of the Misty Mountains, near the broad valleys of the river Anduin, something happened. Eric had just finished carving his way through a battalion of orcs and a pack of snarling wargs. All that remained was a single bruised and battered orc lieutenant. He was struggling to stay conscious barely. Gandalf rushed over, catching his breath as he looked down at the sole survivor. I was starting to think you'd forgotten why we're here, he said. He eyed Eric with a mixture of concern and faint amusement. Relax, Eric replied, calmly sheathing his glowing blade. I know how to hold back mostly. Gandalf stepped forward, staff pressed firmly against the orc's chest to prevent any sudden lunges. The orc glared up with bloodshot eyes, teeth bared menacingly. Filthy creature, Gandalf growled harshly. Speak now. Why are you lot crawling out of your holes again? What are you planning? The orc snarled, drool mixing with blood messily. You cursed spell flinger. One day we'll defeat you thoroughly. Whack! Gandalf's staff came down with enough force to stun completely. The orc let out a choking gasp, now little more than a wheezing sack. I'll ask again, Gandalf said coldly. Tell us your purpose, and I might make your ends swift. We'll wipe this whole valley clean. Every last human gone. Everything ours. Gahik. With that final, spiteful declaration, the orc keeled over and perished, his sneer still frozen on his face. Eric looked over at Gandalf questioningly. Wait, there are still people living in this area. The old wizard nodded slowly, his brows creasing in thought. There are, or were, a few scattered settlements, most long abandoned. Long ago, before the darkness crept back into the land, this valley thrived. The forests were green and vast. People called it Greenwood the Great, not the accursed Mirkwood it is today. Eric listened quietly, arms folded. Back then, Gandalf continued seriously. Free folk, humans, hobbits, even the odd dwarf, lived along these rivers. Many fled when the shadows returned, but not all. Some remained behind. Some are still wandering around. Some simply didn't make it out in time. Eric frowned with concern. Then we've got to do something. He barely finished the sentence before Gandalf stepped forward. He struck the orcs' remains one last time for good measure. Exactly, we need to warn any remaining villagers and help them escape before the orcs get to them. Eric, however, stood his ground firmly. Hold on, we don't need to go warn anyone. You can do that part. Gandalf paused mid-step and turned around. And what exactly will you be doing? Eric grinned confidently. I'll just go eliminate the orcs. That should solve the root of the problem, don't you think? Gandalf gave him a long look carefully. Normally, if someone else had said something so arrogant, the wizard would have corrected them until they saw reason. Because really, taking on thousands of orcs, alone. Suicide usually. But this was Eric speaking. And if the orcs weren't clustered too tightly together, maybe he could pull it off. Gandalf finally nodded in agreement. All right, just don't go getting yourself defeated. I'll return once I've done my part. Safe travels, old man. Same to you, swordsman. And just like that, they parted ways. One headed east to warn the innocent, the other straight into the maw of the enemy. Eric opened up his enchanted map display. The entire region was shrouded in fog of war. Perfect, he muttered under his breath. Time to do some aggressive cartography. Later that night, a lone orc kicked down a crooked fence and tossed a torch into a wooden hut. Flames licked skyward as smoke began to pour out into the night. The orc grumbled, his lumpen face even uglier under the flickering light. Bah, another ghost village. Where's that cursed scout? Didn't he say there were people here? A hunched, nervous orc scurried over anxiously. I swear I saw firelight earlier. Maybe they're hiding. Just then, another orc came running with news. Something had been spotted at the edge of the village. The squad's lieutenant stomped over to investigate thoroughly. Fresh ashes still warm to touch. Clothes drying on a line. A stew pot still bubbling quietly. Someone was here recently. Spread out, find them. But before they could scatter properly, a nearby warg growled. Its ears pinned back in alarm. Its snout pointed toward the shadows ominously. Out of the darkness emerged a figure cloaked in plain linen robes, face calm. Aha, barked the orc lieutenant triumphantly. Gotcha. Wargs leapt forward, tongues lolling in anticipation eagerly. Orcs raised crude blades, dreaming of their prize. Then a faint hum echoed. A blue light flickered mysteriously. The man smiled knowingly. Wait, that smile. The orc lieutenant yanked back on his mount's reins hard. Retreat, retreat. Too late entirely. When the flames finally died down, the battlefield was a scorched graveyard of wargs and orcs. The stench of burnt hair filled the air heavily. Eric stood at the center, brushing soot off his sleeves casually. Gee, clever one got away. Should have brought a horse. Still, the pace suited him well. He continued sweeping through the area methodically, uncovering villages, camps, and orc patrols one by one, like peeling away layers on a massive, bloody game board. Elsewhere. Chief, we saw campfires in a village nearby. Should we raid it? The escort squad was already buzzing with excitement eagerly. Orcs patted their bellies hungrily. Wargs drooled in anticipation. But at the rear, some of the human prisoners, limping, bound, their eyes sunken, shuddered fearfully. More victims soon. No matter how many warnings Gandalf gave, no matter how many orcs Eric cut down, there were always more. Especially these, special units tasked with rounding up human slaves. Bigger numbers, meaner teeth. The orc lieutenant raised a hand, signaling quiet immediately. Fires, just one or many. The scout scratched his bulging skull confusedly. Lots, more than a few houses had them. Were the buildings old or new? Old but weirdly tidy actually. Saw laundry drying in the yard. Any weeds along the road? The scout blinked slowly. Nope, path was clean. Could see everything clearly. Perfect. The lieutenant grinned, revealing broken fangs wickedly. This isn't a trap, it's a real village. Leave the prisoners under guard. The rest of you with me. Time to feast. The horde roared and charged forward. But when they reached the village and kicked down doors forcefully, nothing remained. No people anywhere. Just burning hearths and fresh clothing. What the hell is this? One orc grunted confusedly. Before anyone could answer properly, screams erupted behind them suddenly. From the rear guard position, orcs and wargs on fire soared through the air like grotesque fireworks. They hit the ground hard, thrashing violently. The night lit up in red dramatically. Chapter 45, The Guide. It was him clearly. It had to be him. That human warrior. Darn it, fooled again.